here to help you with breeze, planting seeds and teaching skills. Teachers turn schoolyards to dreams. Who hate school gardens with ease?
Hello and welcome, Victoria. I am so honored to have you. As you know, this School Gardens with Ease podcast is a fairly new podcast, and this would be, I believe, episode number 21, and you would be my first guest. And I have to tell you, I am so honored to have you as my first guest. I have been following your work for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of my audience already know you. But let's just get started with you telling us a little bit about yourself and how all of this wonderful work of yours got started. And we will take the conversation as it flows after that. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you, Leila. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be a guest on your podcast. And yes, a little bit about myself and how I sort of call it my garden story, so to speak, is I've always been an educator, and I really got into outdoor classrooms as wearing my parent hat on. So that is when I was taking my preschooler and my kindergarten to school, back and forth from school, and there was this desolate outdoor space, which was a bit like a courtyard next to the front door of the school. And it was so desolate. I was sort of scratching my head thinking, what if that big what if question, what if we created that into an outdoor classroom? And this is back, my children are now 21 and 22. This was
Wow.
many years ago, and they thought I was bonkers. I was this bonkers parent thinking that is a crazy, crazy, crazy idea. But somehow we were able to pull the community together, and we created really pulled that space together and transformed it into an outdoor classroom.
You know what? It is fascinating that because my older daughter is 21 as well, right? It looks like that both of us actually got around about thinking about this at the same time in
Yeah.
completely two different, places. It's really
Right,
fascinating.
right. So we created this space, and what I found over time was the teachers didn't know what to do with it. It was this beautiful space. The community had come together. It was very organic. Over time, it was like, well, the teachers weren't really coming out to the space, and so I took it upon myself as the crazy parent, to start bringing classes out. And I brought my own children's class out, and we had this, and so teachers started complaining, like, how come they get to go out and we don't get to go out? So I was volunteering my time and bringing classrooms out, and it was really during that time, it was such a special time, some of my favorite memories from that period. And then eventually my kids grew, and they graduated from the school, and I sort of moved on. And what happened was I didn't necessarily want to create outdoor classrooms at all the different schools. I really wanted to empower the teachers, which is very similar to what you were doing at the same time,
That's
which I
right.
find is incredible. And that's really where outdoorclassrooms.com was born, was from that desire to not necessarily create these spaces in the schools, but was actually to empower the teachers to use spaces and create spaces like that. So we've created that's where outdoor classrooms evolved. And then, during COVID, like yourself, things evolved even more, which was they called me back. So how many years later they said, oh, Victoria, actually, we would love to create outdoor classrooms in all the elementary schools, which was my vision then, but they just weren't ready for it.
Wow,
So
I know, right?
they
That is
just were
that is fascinating.
fascinated. How COVID was actually a blessing to many of us outdoor educators. So
That's
yeah.
true. It was a blessing in disguise for sure,
Yeah.
because with Kids Growing City, as you know, we were closed completely for 2 years in a row. It was pretty devastating for me and everybody else who was growing gardens. The gardens were,
Yeah.
not taken care of, and they were like we were losing them. It really looked bad and sad and depressing at first, but as you were saying, the changes, people are amazing. People in this
Yeah.
community, the outdoor educators are really, really amazing. The way
Incredible.
that we all, in each one of us in our own way, turned that, into a blessing is really
Yeah.
fascinating.
When I was working with the schools, what I learned was there was these phases that teachers were going through. So they asked me to come in, and then I thought, oh, okay, everybody's kind of in this same place. And I very, very quickly learned that they were not. So I came up with the 5 phases of teaching outdoors, which is really looking at the infrastructure at your outdoor space, which is phase 1. Phase 2 is actually bringing the kids outdoors. I found there were many teachers that some felt very comfortable, some actually did not feel comfortable. They wanted to stay inside the safety of their indoor classroom. And then it was actually, once we got through phase 1 and 2, was the actual teaching and learning outdoors. So that was phase 3, which is much more abundant. And then phase 4 was, what happens is, if we're in New England, and I work with teachers all over the country, but it's what happens with the weather, what happens when it snows, what happens when it rains. Oh, we can't go outside then. But actually, those were the most favorite times to go out. So really talking about weather and proper gear. And then the last phase, which is sustainability, which has 2 pieces, which is one piece is the sustainability practices of teaching children the sustainability practices, but it's also, we've created this amazing outdoor space. How do we sustain it over the years? So that was the 5 phases of teaching outdoors, which has been really an interesting journey to tap into and really advise and guide educators through those 5 phases. And then if they wanted to up level their outdoor practice or their outdoor teaching practice, they kind of begin the phases again.
That's awesome. It's really interesting when you were talking about different teachers being in different stages, being comfortable with the outdoor space and teaching. It's very similar to my experience because at the beginning, I mean, before COVID, when we were doing the work, obviously it was alongside teachers, but we were the main people who were actually getting things done. It was all outdoors. But then when COVID happened and I decided to give the program to the teachers so that it's in their hands, I realized the same thing. Not everybody
Yeah.
is as comfortable as being outside right away from the get-go, and that is completely normal because that's not what we are used to. So that's where the Oasis classroom started. Essentially became, let's start growing in the indoors, and go through the learning curve of that, and then move outdoors maybe
Right.
next year.
And then that piece of it, which is what I discovered sort of in the infrastructure, was that we have 4 different types of gardens. You are speaking of the Gardens that Feed, which is one of our gardens, but we have actually 3 more that we've incorporated into the infrastructure of our outdoor classrooms.
So tell me a little bit about the other 3 gardens. I'm really fascinated.
Oh, I would love
I'm
to. I would
curious. Want to know?
love. I would love to. So the Gardens that Feed, which is growing food, and then we have the other 3 we have the gardens that attract wildlife, and so those are all pollinator gardens, and where we're teaching children how to plant native plants and so on and so forth. So they're attracting butterflies and bugs. We make log hotels, so we're creating habitats that are attracting all different wildlife. And then we have gardens for art and beauty. So those are all beautiful flowers and bouquets, and we actually incorporating music and stages, and so all really looking
Oh,
at the
that's
art and beauty.
fantastic.
And,
Sorry,
and then
sorry
we
to.
have
I just,
well, what
I'm just so
evolved,
excited about that.
how this all evolved was when, during that time that I was, when my kids were very young, I did all this research, and I found that there were these 4 different camps of people, and they were all very separate. So, and then the 4th one was gardens as outdoor learning stations. And that's where the mud kitchens and the water walls and the fishing bridges and the makerspace gardens, all of those types of gardens go under that sort of umbrella. And what I like to tell educators and parents is that we have the elements to all 4 of these types of gardens, and that they are the ones that get to choose what to put into their outdoor space. So teaching them what the elements are, and then I like to think of it as an ice cream sundae, that you have 4 different ice cream flavors and that representing the 4 types of gardens, and then they can pick which ice cream that they want to put in. They can pick which flavor they want, and then to sprinkle the elements that go into each of those garden are sort of like the sprinkles and the sauces and whatnot. And therefore, they're creating, even though all our outdoor spaces are very, very different, they essentially have the power, so to speak, to really create what they want and what they need that will match their curriculum, their programs. So some programs feel very nervous about growing food, and then but
I
it's
know.
really teaching like conversations that you and I have had, which is it's really can be as simple as growing a seed in a window. So depending on the curriculum, the educators, where they want to take it. And it can be that they start with a type of garden that they feel very comfortable with, which might be creating a mud kitchen. And it might be that they move into the last thing they do is the gardens that feed, because that in their eyes might be the most difficult. So I love the four types of teaching gardens and alongside of the 5 phases of teaching outdoors, which is pretty much a lot of our frameworks at outdoorclassrooms.com.
Right, right. I was gonna actually go back there and make sure that I understood it. So there's four types of gardens, but there's also 5 stages of teaching. And you can,
Yes,
right? And you can choose whichever one of these types of gardens you want to start with because that's what interests
right.
you. It connects to your curriculum better. For whatever reason, you feel more comfortable starting there, and you can go through these 5 stages of teaching with each one of these types of gardens, and you can move between the types of gardens as you wish and add different elements. Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, so I introduced the four types of gardens within the phase one, which is the infrastructure, because the infrastructure of your outdoor space is, well, what's in it?
Right.
So this is where educators will choose, well, what would you like to put into, and these are the options. These are all the different options you can choose from. And these are the elements within the options. And I have assessment tools. And so it really helps educators figure out where they are, where they want to go. And then during just getting outdoors is just how do we get, if you have a large group or a small group, how do we get the mindset around teaching outdoors and getting yourself outdoors? And then that phase three, which is the teaching and the learning, is actually looking within your four types of gardens and thinking, okay, how can we connect this to the curriculum?
Right.
And then how can we spend more time outdoors and dealing with the weather and or not really dealing with it, but embracing the
Exactly.
weather as another teacher. So it's I think we speak the very similar
Yes,
language.
that's right. Yeah, dealing with the weather is for us, it's because our focus is growing food, which is one of your types of gardens.
Yeah,
And well, where we live over here in Toronto, it gets pretty cold. And then when we come back in fall, a lot of educators think that that's it. Even for the growing food, you can still,
yeah,
even in colder weather, there are plants that you can plant, obviously indoors, but even outside. And understanding that there are cold plants, the cold loving plants and hot loving plants and all kinds of different plants. Some of them are not, proper for this weather. Some of them are proper for this weather. If we cover them, we can protect them. All of that learning also can happen all the way to winter
yeah.
because we do have plants that are still thriving and it's snowing. Like they have snow on top of them, like things like kale and parsley, even Swiss chard. Like there are plants that still, are doing well, and there are plants that
I love it.
grow really fast. And if you plant them in the beginning of the school year, which is in fall, like in a month, you can harvest them.
We planted peas. I also have a parent-child program, and we just planted our peas a couple weeks ago, and they're just like it's just magic. It's magic, and to see the children's reaction, and that's really where I get a little goosebumpy. People are like, "Why do you do what you do?" And it's just the need for it. Just you and I have talked about this just in terms of the desperate need that we need to get children to build that relationship with nature, whether it is in any of these four types of gardens, but it's the need, and then the mindfulness. And we have so many children that all the research and saying that when they are connected to nature, that they are eating better, they're not as stressed, their obesity level, they're moving. So there's reasons why we need to make this call to action for educators, parents, communities to spend more time outdoors so the next generation can have that relationship, and so that they in turn can become advocates of our natural world.
This idea always has existed. It has gotten better, but it always existed that why do I have to learn? to grow my own food. That's not my job. But it's not only the connection with good food and nature and understanding how we connect to nature, and without it, we can't grow our own food. Where is it coming from and all of that? It's really, really important. And you don't have to want to become a farmer to learn how to grow food. Even if you're a doctor, even
Right.
if you're a lawyer, even if you become an engineer of some sort, even if you're a writer, like any type of profession that you would like to go in, are going to be a better one in whatever it is that you're doing if you know that you're connected to nature, like engineering, for example, right? Or law, for example. We will be, having better, like, politicians, even like any type of profession. If our kids are connected to nature and appreciate it,
Yeah.
they're going to be a better person. They're going to do a better job in their profession, whatever that profession is. And I think that's a very important thing. It's huge.
It's a huge, yeah. And I think that in essence what Outdoor Classroom does is sort of when I was doing that research and found these four very different types of people that were very separate from each other, all very interested in nature, all their focus and their focus was so different. And what I like to do is merge them all and bring them all together and then see what happens and sort of watch that magic with the children. And so there's lots of different opportunity
That's
for
awesome.
that
Yeah.
connection.
I wanted to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the educators and how, because one of the things
Yeah,
that we hear a lot, and we were talking about this before, is that I don't have time. How do I do this on top of
yeah.
everything else that I am mandated to teach? Like, I have to cover math, I have to cover, language, I have to cover this, and, special needs kids in my class. The demands on the teachers is not a joke. We know that they're the busiest people on the planet. So how do you address that? I don't have time to take them outside. I don't have time to spend time to make any of these types of gardens that you're telling me.
It's on so many different levels. It's a school, if you're in a school and it's the mindset of the leadership in the school, that if the leadership in the school is on board, so to speak, then that energy and that excitement can spread. So it really and oftentimes there's maybe one or two people that are excited about it, maybe on the other end, the teachers. But my message is always the outcome of being outdoors and taking your kids, the time and the effort that it might, the extra time and the effort in the beginning, because it's something new. And again, anything that's new there is going to be kind of this curve until it becomes kind of habit. And what we want to do is we want to create a new habit to get teachers and educators outdoors systematically. This is just what we do. And that means we have to train the kids. That means we have to
And that
train the
takes time.
teachers. But there has to be a mindset, and that takes time. But there needs to be in the very beginning a mindset shift. If teachers don't feel like, oh, yes, the outcome of this is going to be actually beneficial, that the kids will be more relaxed, there'll be less behavior problems, there'll be all of these wonderful things. But there needs to be that leap of faith that, okay, if I take the extra time and the effort to get there, this outcome is going to happen. That it's a community-wide effort. That needs to happen. Oftentimes I see it's one teacher in a school. It might be one kindergarten teacher in the school that is totally believes in this and will be the charge. It's different with different schools, but my dream is that we actually integrate this training into teacher training. So they're coming out of schools kind of trained, like with the mindset of, oh, yes, this is definitely going to be there. But what I'm also hearing is when these young teachers go into the schools, it's the systems in the schools that
That's right.
are restricting them. So there needs to be sort of, again, like what we are doing, just talking about it. The more that we can talk about the benefits, the more that we can normalize going outdoors, the more that we can make this into a movement, then slowly things will change. But to me, it's about habits. It's about how can we make going outdoors and working in our outdoor classroom space
Right.
just
Right.
a regular thing. How can we do that? It's any new habit takes repetition, repetition. So it's a matter of making it a part of a teacher's day.
Yeah, making an effort at the beginning, and then it becomes a habit. And when it becomes a habit, your kids, your students are used to it now. They have been trained how to behave outside, outdoors, and how to interact with the outdoors.
That's where my 5 phases, it's to really, how can I make that into a habit and to take them through these 5 phases with assessment tools and say, okay, first make a gathering space in your outdoor space. So you have somewhere to go and then figure out, how you're going to get outdoors. So it's really breaking down the whole process. So you're not just saying, oh, it's just, okay, Jane, you actually, here is how you are going to do it. And all along the way, you're going to have an assessment tool. So you know exactly the little minute thing that you might need to change to make it easier or better. So that's where those 5 phases
That's
comes
exactly
in.
what they need, right? Yeah, so because it's easy to say,
Yeah. Just,
yeah,
I get
it's
a
easy
lot
to
of, where
say,
do I
take the
start?
kids outside. But hey, how do I do that? Because they can get bored outside too if they're not led to interact in a meaningful way with the outdoor environment. That can be chaotic.
Right. And it's scary. Teachers don't want that. So they opt to stay in. But if they have an assessment, they say, okay, before going outside, make sure you have X, Y, and Z. And here's the whole list. And before you go outside, and then as you go outside, this is how you actually move 20 kids outside and to do not just for recess, but for a learning experience. So it might be that they just go outside to read a book and then they come back inside. They actually practice going in and outside. So then when that muscle gets strong and that habit becomes kind of normal, then, oh, let's
That's
maybe
right.
teach a lesson outside. What could that lesson be? Which garden do we want to be in? And then, oh, wow, and then what starts happening, which is the magic, is the kids that were having the most trouble in the indoor classroom become the leaders. The whole class becomes more relaxed because just being outside is more relaxing. And that's where all the magic starts happening. And then teachers begin to, oh, wow, this does work. So all the research that we've been telling them about is put into play. And then all of a sudden, then all of the weather starts changing. And then it's like kids want to go outside. So they get the right gear, they get the right, that then all of that, then it just becomes this cycle.
As you were saying, everybody knows the articles we've been reading and the books
Right.
that we've been reading, and everybody says, let's take them outside. It's going to be good for this, it's going to be good for that. But as long as it's just a knowledge in our head and not an experience, it's not going to settle, and we're not going to
Yes.
really understand it, right? The real knowing comes from when you actually do it and it becomes a habit, and then the kids you know start changing, their behaviors start changing, and you can see it with your own
Yeah.
eyes what a difference it makes. And that's when
Yeah.
the real magic, as you were saying, happens.
Magic. That's the magic. I get goosebumps thinking about it because it's truly that if we can get educators to that point where they're seeing the changes in their children, that's my mission. That's like, just if we can get there, then I think we have a big movement.
And the fact that some of these kids, we have different children with different learning needs, right? And some of them really thrive much better outside. Most of them do, but some of them specifically, they can't, learn very well in the four walls of the classroom.
But you speak about that just in terms of the influence that these experiences can have on families and that they can carry over if they can't necessarily get all the kids out during the day. It's just as important to send that same message to families and parents to how can they be spending more time outdoors and connecting, and backyards can have these 4 types of gardens. They can have gardens that feed as well. So it's really a movement, not only just in the schools, but for all children to have access to an outdoor classroom.
That's right.
That's my
Let's get
vision.
there. We can do it.
We
No,
can't do it
no, of
alone. We got
course.
to do it
Yes,
together,
yes. And that's
right?
why we're talking about it. That's why we're having these podcasts, these conversations. And I invite all the educators who are listening to this podcast, please join in the conversation. Victoria, tell us a little bit about how the audience can find you and connect with you.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been absolutely lovely. Can be found, you can email me at any point at victoria@outdoor-classrooms.com. There is a lot of resources, wonderful resources on my webpage, which is www.outdoor-classrooms.com. We have a membership community called The Circle. We have new workshops that go out every month on different topics. We have a certification program that's going to be launched soon. And yes, if there's lots of fun things you can find there. And if you're local to Beverly, Massachusetts, come and say hello. We have a wonderful Secret Gardens outdoor classroom that we do lots of fun things here as well. So
no problem. That sounds fascinating. All of those links and email address and all of that, I'll make sure that it's also in the show notes. So if you missed that and you couldn't, jot it down, make sure that you go to the show notes and connect with Victoria. If you're interested in this topic and you would like to either start going outdoors with your students or enhance it, and take it to the next level. Anything else that you want to say, Victoria, just to, wrap it up?
Oh, I just want to thank you, Leila, for all the work that you are doing. It's so exciting to meet another like-minded soul that's doing very similar work. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for inviting me to be your guest on your podcast. And to everybody that's listening, just open the door and go outside. Do not be afraid. There's plenty to explore. You do not have to be an expert. It's just a matter of your mindset and wanting to go outdoors and see what's out there. So just find a park. If you don't have a backyard, just go outside and have fun.
No, thank you. Thank you. This was an amazing conversation. I hope that we get to connect more in the future. And yeah, make sure the audience, please make sure that you go in the show notes and connect with Victoria, and let's get them outside. You've listened to the entire episode, and for that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please share this episode with other teachers who might be interested in this topic. See you next week for a new episode.